Okay, I think that means it's time to get started. So let me share my screen. And we'll get going. My name is Kylie Anglin. I'm a PhD student at the University of Virginia School of Education and Human Development. And as an education researcher, I'm interested in identifying the policies and programs that have positive impact on student lives. So this means my colleagues and I are interested in questions like, what is the impact of teacher performance pay on student achievement? What is the impact of state takeover on low performance schools? What is the impact of school reopenings on community health and student learning? And we have lots of data on outcomes to be able to answer these questions. So we have test score data and attendance data, school discipline, crime and safety surveys, graduation rates, college going. All of this information is collected and aggregated by state education agencies and the Institute for Education Sciences, and they are in a beautiful, cleaned format that we can easily use to analyze the impact of programs. But we also have lots of questions, not just on the impact of programs, but on what programs actually look like in practice. So what does teacher performance pay look like at the school level? What is the experience of being a student in a takeover school? How are schools reopening? We generally have two approaches to answering these questions. We can take the local approach, where we survey teachers and observe classrooms and gain an in-depth understanding of a single school district. Or we can take a scaled approach, where we collect outcomes on all impacted students, but we have little information on the program itself. So we get a cursory understanding of many districts. Or we have a third option, which is to have a lot of money, in which case we can just survey all of the schools. But if we don't have a lot of money, then we need low-cost methods of collecting local data at scale. And it turns out lots of good education data are posted online. So for example, if I were interested in the impact of school reopenings and what school reopenings actually look like, I can do some searches of school websites. So I searched Charlottesville City Schools websites and learned that they have had, that they will not have in-person instruction until at least January. But Albemarle County schools have already had in-person instruction, up to 2,500 students, and they're thinking about making that 5,000 students now. So this is really good information, but it took a long time to search for those documents and to extract the information that I care about. And this is the difference between traditional data on outcomes in education and then the policy data that we are interested in to learn about how programs actually operate. So in education, our traditional outcomes data are heavily regulated. Schools are required to report, for example, scores on tests. And they are structured. We can download a simple CSV file that looks exactly how we want it to look for analyses. And then they're centralized. We know exactly where to go to get this information. And that none of those things are true when it comes to policy documents. They're highly variable. Sometimes they're in Word docs, sometimes they're in Google Drive links, and sometimes they have information on the number of students that are in person, and sometimes they have information on how students will be in person. They're unstructured, right? They don't look like these regular CSV files that we want to see. And they're in lots of locations. And so searching for those documents can take quite a bit of time. And this is the problem I faced when I was trying to estimate the impact of the Texas Districts of Innovation statute. So under this statute, Texas public school districts are able to opt out of any regulation that doesn't apply to the state's charter schools. So this includes regulations that require that require schools to hire certified teachers, to cap class sizes, to hold school for a minimum number of minutes, or any of hundreds of regulations. And all a district needs to do to take advantage of these flexibilities is to draft a district of innovation plan where they state the regulations that they no longer want to have to follow, and then they post that innovation plan online. So these innovation plans contain key information, right? I learn what regulations are actually being exempted, but they're unstructured. They're in many formats: PDFs, Google Drives, HTML files, Word docs, and in many locations. I only know that they're somewhere on a district website. So I can go and search for all of these documents and then hand code the regulatory exemptions, but that is a time-consuming process. But there's another option. So using the Gather, Narrow, Extract framework, there's a key difference here. So the insight here is that we don't need to search for the right document. Just gather all of the text from all of the websites, and then use a classifier to identify the text that's actually relevant. So the process occurs in 3 steps. First, you gather every potentially relevant document with a web crawler. You narrow your corpus using a text classifier, and then you extract the data that you're actually interested in using simple pattern matching in some cases, or if things are more complicated, you can use additional classifiers. So the process is akin to a fisherman going out and trying to catch some fish. The fisherman casts his net and then catches the fish that he wants, but he also catches a bunch of debris and a bunch of fish that he doesn't want. And he has to throw all of that out and then clean the fish that are actually worthy of eating. So to do this in the Texas District of Innovation context, I visited district websites and downloaded all of their documents, again, in many different formats. So this guarantees that I'm going to get those innovation plans. But it also guarantees that I'm going to get lots of irrelevant documents, like the Houston 2020 Junior Livestock Show entry form. This is not relevant unless the policy I'm interested in is the cost of entering a dairy heifer into a livestock show. But that's not a problem. I'll collect it all. The documents that I care about, the documents that I don't care about. And then I'll take a subset of that data, extract the plain text, and label it as either relevant, as it was in the case of the Abernathy ISD innovation plan, or irrelevant, as it was with the case of the livestock show entry form. After labeling the subset of data, you can apply the text classifier to your full corpus of data, narrowing down your documents to the ones that you actually care about. Of course, they don't yet look like I want them to look. It's still natural language in an unstructured format. So from there, I need to extract the things that I care about. And in this case, I cared about 2 things: the regulatory exemptions, and then the date that a district became a district of innovation. So regulatory exemptions was pretty easy. I can just do some pattern matching here. You can see that the statutes are labeled by the statute symbol, some numbers, a period, and some more numbers. So I can extract that pretty easily. Dates are a little bit more difficult. There's a lot of dates in the documents. Some of them are the actual implementation dates, and some of them are the dates that they just began the process. And some of them are just totally irrelevant dates. So from there, I extracted all dates and the text surrounding the date, and then again trained the classifier to recognize the date that a school board actually voted on the adoption of an innovation plan. And now my data looks like I want it to look. I've got my CSV file, I've got districts in my rows, regulatory exemptions in my columns, and I know what to do with this data to be able to analyze the impact of the law. And so I found some interesting results from this. So the first thing to note is that there are over 800 districts of innovation in Texas. So a district of innovation is now the most common district type in Texas. The majority of schools are no longer subject to regulatory exemptions. And of course, we can also learn how districts are responding to that regulatory freedom. So here I learned that the majority of school districts are you are now free to hire uncertified teachers. They're also free to raise the caps on elementary class sizes. Almost half of all districts of innovation exempt that rule, and free to shorten the length of the school year. About a third of districts exempt that rule. So there's lots of applications of this kind of work in education. Lots of interesting data is hosted online. So student handbooks, for example, contain information on disciplinary policies and on dress codes. Staff handbooks contain information on salary schedules and professional development. We can learn what technology schools are using as they move courses online. And collective bargaining agreements contain information about, say, teacher tenure. So this is lots of good information that relates to policies that we care about. But it's also relevant beyond education. Again, there's hospital policies are posted online, city statutes, insurance coverage, corporate policies, homeowners association rules, lots of information in lots of different fields. And it applies to any time that you want local data from the internet at scale. So if you have questions about the actual tools that I used, or implementation or validation, or what to think about missing data, a lot of those questions are addressed in the paper, which I encourage you to go check out. But also I'll stay here for a minute or two to see if people have any questions in the chat, and then I'll go to the more informal question and answer room. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat, and I'll wait for a question. Okay, I'll sneak over to the room then. Thank you, everybody.